Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for that very generous introduction. I want to thank all of you for coming out this morning and allowing me to be with you. What I'd like to do is talk to you several minutes about the challenges facing our country and why this election is so important. Afterwards, I'll look forward to taking your questions for as long as we have, and questions on anything and everything. May not be anything I've talked about. And then afterwards, I'll stick around and visit with folks as long as you want. So if you don't get a chance to ask your question, if you want to take a picture, I'll stay up here for as long as people want to visit. Now, before I start my remarks, I want to start with just some news of the day. Now, I'm not sure if everybody this morning got a chance to read your newspaper or turn on the TV news and see what's happening in our world. I want to give you a quick update just in case you missed it. You may have seen the breaking news. Hillary Clinton, her email practices now being investigated by the FBI. It has now come out that some of our nation's top secrets may have been on that server system. Now, I'm just curious, before I go any further, I'm curious how many people, how many men and women do we have here who have worn our nation's uniform, who have served? If you would just raise your hand, who've served us in the military. Let's give these heroes a great round of applause for everything they've done for us. For our veterans, for our service members, here's my question for you. When you were in the military, if you had been reckless with the nation's secrets, what do you think would have happened to you?
Spent a little time in Kansas.
It wouldn't have taken 2 years.
All expenses paid.
That's exactly right. Well, why should it be different then for Secretary Clinton? My concern with this is if you want to be our commander-in-chief, shouldn't the same rules that apply to the private, shouldn't they also apply to the general, to our leaders as well? I don't know about you, but I am tired of the political class thinking that one set of rules apply to them and another set of rules apply to the rest of us. You know, I know the media, they love to get Republicans to attack each other. And you may have heard me say a couple of days ago jokingly that, look, I know one way to ensure that I get more media coverage is to continue to talk about Donald Trump. It seems like the media is just obsessed with trying to get Republicans to attack him. So I said, I'm just going to start randomly mentioning his name every several minutes, just to get the media to cover me more. But you know, the real soap opera is not on the Republican side, it's on the Democrat side. Let's just take a look at their candidates running for president. They're front runner. They're front runner. Now, Hillary Clinton, I told you the FBI is investigating her email practices. She is sworn to a federal judge. She has sworn in an affidavit that she has turned over all of her work related to emails under the penalty of perjury. That means she is one email away from having to go to prison. She'd better hope the Chinese don't do a document dump and reveal all of her emails, by the way. I know Martha Stewart is her good friend. I know she's been advising her on redecorating tips. You may want to start advising her about how to survive in prison instead. Orange really is the new black. But then their second place candidate, now he's actually first in one poll today, their second place candidate is a self-described socialist. I'm not making this up, but by the way, all that means is he's more honest than their candidate in first place. Their third place candidate had to apologize for saying that all lives matter and has blamed ISIS, the creation of ISIS, on global warming. Their fourth place candidate, his main platform is he wants to put America in the metric system. And I haven't even gotten to Joe Biden yet. And can I just say, I do hope that Joe Biden runs simply for just pure entertainment value for the rest of the country. So look, we are just fine on the Republican side. The soap opera, the dysfunction is actually on the Democratic side. But I didn't just come to poke fun at the Democrats running for president. I really do want to talk to you about this election and where our country is going. Look, it won't surprise you to hear me say this, but I think the next election is the most important election of our lifetimes. Now, that's not a big surprise. You probably never heard any politician ever stand in front of you and say, don't worry about the next election. Stay home. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Politicians are always telling you the next one's the important one. But folks, I'm here to tell you this next one really, really is. Now, why do I say that? Look, the president has done a lot of damage to our country. $18 trillion of debt. EPA regulations, or they're trying to regulate the water in our backyard. Obamacare, we got bureaucrats between doctors and their patients. A failed foreign policy where we won't stand with Israel, and yet we're about to allow Iran to become a nuclear power. And the list goes on and on and on. And yet the worst thing this president has done is that he is literally trying to redefine the idea of America. What do I mean by that? If you watch his policies, you listen to his speeches, he is literally trying to redefine the idea of the American dream. Every time he speaks, he's always trying to divide us by gender, by race, by geography, by age. He's also trying to talk to us about redistribution and more government spending and more government borrowing and more taxing, more regulating. We now live at a time we've got record low participation rate in the workforce. You have to go back decades to match this rate. At the same time, record high number of Americans on food stamps. I don't know about you, but that is not the American dream that my parents taught me about. If we allow them, this president and his apprentice-in-chief, Hillary Clinton, they're trying to turn the American dream into the European nightmare. We should at least give Bernie Sanders credit. At least he's honest enough to call himself a socialist. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, they're no better. They just don't call themselves socialist. You know, the reality is we will become the next Greece. The difference will be there'll be nobody to bail us out. We are the last hope of freedom in this world. I don't know about you, but that is not the American dream we learned about from our parents growing up as children. I want to tell you a little bit about my background and then tell you what we must do to get our country back on the right path. First, I want to tell you about my family and my background. The reason I'm so passionate about this, my parents, they have lived the American dream. My daddy's 1 of 9. Born and raised in a house without electricity, without running water. Was the first and the only one in the family to get past the 5th grade. Now, I know all this because we heard these stories every single day growing up. You probably had a father or a mom like that. Good luck trying to get an allowance out of a parent like that. You know the type. You know, they walked uphill going to school, walked uphill coming home from school too. But here's the amazing thing about my parents. Over 40 years ago, the first time they ever got on a plane, they came halfway across the world to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They left behind their parents, their siblings, their families, their friends. You know, they had never visited America. They didn't even know anybody who had gone to Louisiana and could come back and tell them what it was like. I try to tell my kids, back then you couldn't Google, you couldn't go online and search what America was like. There were no computers in the home, no internet, nothing like that. And yet if they got on that plane anyway, when you think about it, they were really coming to an idea as much as they were coming to a place. They were coming to the idea of freedom and opportunity. They were coming for the American dream. Now, by the way, my parents, they came legally when they came to this country. I know you're not supposed to say this, but I'm going to say this anyway. If folks want to come to our country, they should come legally, they should learn English, they should adopt our values, and when they get here, they should roll up their sleeves and get to work if they want to come here. You know, we used to proudly call America the great melting pot. I don't think it's too much to say to people, you should want to be an American if you want to come here. We're not forcing people to come here. And we should allow people to use the freedoms we give to everybody to undermine freedoms for other people. That's just common sense. And if we don't do that, you want to see the alternative, look at what's happening in Europe. 2nd and 3rd generation immigrants there that don't consider themselves parts of those societies and those cultures. Look, I don't know about you, but I am tired of all the division in America. Our president is now the divider-in-chief. Tries to divide us every day in every way. The reality is I'm tired of the hyphenated Americans. Folks, we're not African Americans. We're not Asian Americans. We're not rich Americans. We're not poor Americans. We're all Americans, united as one. And I know you're not supposed to say this either. I'm going to say it anyway. We need to insist on assimilation. We need to insist on integration. Look, invasion without assimilation, immigration without assimilation, that's not immigration, that's invasion. And we must not let that happen in our country. But going back to my parents. So they got here, they got to Baton Rouge. My mom, she went to school at LSU. My dad, he didn't know anybody, but he wanted a job. He came here to work. And so what he did next was pretty funny in retrospect, but he didn't know any better. He started calling companies out of the yellow pages. Called company after company looking for a job. And finally, he must have worn down some guy from a railroad company because he told my dad, look, you can start work on Monday morning. And I love what my dad tells his new boss next. He hasn't even met his boss. This is one of the worst things you could ever say in a job interview. My dad tells his new boss, he goes, well, that's great. I'll start Monday. He goes, now look, I don't have a car. I don't have a driver's license. So he said, you're going to have to pick me up on the way to work Monday morning. I mean, who does that with their new boss? But he was so taken by my dad's enthusiasm to work, that's exactly what he did. Picked him up. Now, 6 months later, I was born. I was what you would politely call a pre-existing condition when I was born. That doesn't mean anything bad. That just means my parents' insurance didn't cover me. But there was no Obamacare or anything, but I love what my dad did next. My dad went to that hospital and he went and met with the doctor. And there were no government forms, there was no paperwork, there was no bureaucracy, not even a contract. My dad simply went to that doctor, man to man, and he said this. He said, I want to send you a check every month until I pay this bill in full. He then shook his hand, and that's exactly what he did. That's just what people did back then. I asked my dad, now how would that work today? I mean, really, how do you pay for a baby on layaway? I mean, think about that. If you skip a payment, what happens?
Repossession.
Yeah, do they repossess the baby? They come take him back? My dad says, you were such a bad little baby, we would have skipped a payment and sent you back if that had been an option. He said, don't worry about it. You're all paid for. Nobody's coming to get you. The reason I tell you my parents' story, my parents came here to chase the American dream. They caught the American dream. They have lived the American dream. I want my children and one day my grandchildren to live the American dream. I want your children and grandchildren to live the American dream. Folks, this election is not about saving the Republican Party. This election is about saving the United States of America and restoring that American dream for all of our children. Now look, you're going to hear from a lot of candidates running for president, and they sound great. And a lot of them are going to come here and say things that sound pretty good. They're going to talk to you about cutting the size of government. They're going to talk to you about protecting the unborn. They're going to talk to you about fighting Common Core. I suspect many of you are going to hear many of the candidates running for president. You probably already heard from many of them. It's easy to deliver red meat lines. We've got a lot of great talkers and famous names running for president. The problem is we already have a great talker in the White House. Look, if great talk was all it took, we'd be on easy street right now. Things would be going great in this country. We've got a first-term senator who never ran anything in the White House today. We cannot afford 4 more years of on-the-job training. We need a doer, not a talker. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not just here to talk about those things. We've already done those things in Louisiana. So for example, in my state, since I've been governor, we've actually cut our state budget by 26%. We've got over 30,000 fewer state government bureaucrats than the day I took office. Now look, every Republican running for president will talk about cutting government spending. We're the only ones that have actually done it. There are not 2 candidates that have done this in this race. There is exactly 1 candidate who's actually cut government spending. But it's not just that. We've had 8 credit upgrades since I've been governor. We now are a top 10 state for private sector job creation. We have more people working in Louisiana, earning a higher income than ever before. We've reversed 25 years of out-migration, 7 years in a row of in-migration. Since I've been governor, we've been rated the most pro-life state 6 years in a row in the entire country. We put our own Second Amendment protections in our state constitution. We have fought for statewide school choice so the dollars follow the child instead of making the child follow the dollars, because we trust parents to know how their kids should be educated better than the bureaucrats in Baton Rouge or D.C. I don't know about you, but like so many of you, I was horrified by these Planned Parenthood videos that came out in the last several weeks. You know, I'm pro-life, but even those that are pro-life, I hope their consciences would be offended. We have a bunch of science deniers on the left. They talk about what's going on without ever using the word babies. They talk about specimens and tissues. You know, it was disgusting to watch this woman eating her salad, drinking her wine, talking about selling babies' body parts like it was some kind of commercial transaction. No big deal. When the first video came out in Louisiana, what we did was this. Planned Parenthood doesn't do any abortions in Louisiana, but they'd like to open a clinic in New Orleans to provide abortions. So we said we're not going to actually issue them any permits. Instead, we launched an investigation. We asked the state of Texas and the FBI to cooperate with us in that investigation. As more videos came out over a week ago, at the beginning of last week, we canceled their contract in Medicaid to make sure they're not going to get any taxpayer dollars in the state of Louisiana. Now, you may have seen in the debate last week, I was asked about Planned Parenthood. And I said this, I said, Planned Parenthood better hope that Secretary Clinton is elected President of the United States. Because under President Jindal in January of 2017, I'm going to send the Department of Justice and the IRS to investigate Planned Parenthood. Folks, they should not be getting 1 penny of our federal taxpayer dollars, much less $500 million. Well, afterwards, the left didn't like that. After the debate, the media asked me, well, you can't really, Governor, don't you want to take that back? You're not really going to send the Department of Justice and the IRS to investigate Planned Parenthood, are you? So let me be very, very clear. As president, I will send the Department of Justice, I will send the IRS, I will send the EPA, I will send OSHA, I will send every agency I can find to investigate Planned Parenthood. We've got to put an end to these barbaric practices being done right here in our country. So when you have other candidates come here and tell you they're going to shrink the size of government, repeal Obamacare, and fight ISIS, remember this. Talk is easy. Talk is cheap. We need a doer, not a talker. I've got the backbone, I have got the bandwidth, I've got the experience to get us through these challenging times. It's not enough just to send any Republican to D.C. to be our president. We need a Republican that does not need on-the-job training. We need a leader who will do and say the things you are not supposed to be able to do and say. If you wonder why it's not enough just to send any Republican, look what happened when we took the Senate back. They promised us if we gave them the majority, they would get rid of amnesty. They would repeal Obamacare. And yet what has changed? We need somebody who will take on the establishment in both parties. You know, if you want another reason why it's so important we send the right person to be president, remember how frustrated we were with those Supreme Court decisions just several weeks ago. You know, in the course of a week, at the beginning of the week, the Supreme Court decided they were going to rewrite the law for a second time to save Obamacare. Scalia said this meant that words no longer have meaning. At the end of the week, the Supreme Court decided they were going to try to change the definition of marriage. Chief Justice Roberts said that they weren't reading the Constitution. So to recap, in just 1 week, the Supreme Court decided they couldn't be bothered to pick up a dictionary, they couldn't be bothered to pick up a copy of the Constitution. That happened to be the week that I announced my campaign for the presidency. And I was actually right here in Iowa when the decisions came out about marriage. I was actually coming into this very restaurant. And a bunch of the reporters that are here today, they caught up with me and they said, Governor, what do you think about the Supreme Court decision? Now, one of the things you'll find out about me, if you ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to tell you what I think. And so I was pretty frustrated, and this is what I said. I said, well, look, if they can't be bothered to pick up a dictionary or a constitution, if they're just going to follow public opinions, I said, if they're not going to do their jobs, why don't we save a couple of bucks? Why don't we just get rid of the Supreme Court? Now, Secretary Clinton, she didn't like that. A couple of weeks later, she was in Iowa. She criticized me. And just to show you that I can be reasonable and accommodating, I said, all right, fine. If we don't want to get rid of the whole court, We could still save a couple of bucks. Let's just get rid of 2/3 of the court. There are about 3 of those justices that actually did their job and read the Constitution. Now, folks, I'm here to tell you, when it comes to marriage, as a Christian, I don't believe that any earthly court can change the definition of marriage as ordained by God Almighty. And the reality is, unlike President Obama and Secretary Clinton, my views on marriage are not evolving. I continue to believe it's between a man and a woman. And I support federal efforts to restore our 10th Amendment rights and to continue to define marriage as being between a man and a woman. But make no mistake about it, the left isn't content with taking away our 10th Amendment rights. Now they're going after our First Amendment rights. Now, with government sanction, the left is going after Christian businesses and individuals who don't want to violate their consciences, who don't want to participate in wedding ceremonies that violate their religious beliefs. And make no mistake about it, they're going to go after the pastors and the churches next. So in my state, for example, we passed a Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And then when the legislature wouldn't do the Marriage Conscience Act, I issued an executive order saying the state of Louisiana won't discriminate against individuals or businesses that have a traditional view of marriage. The ACLU sued us.
Of course.
You know, they were for religious liberty before they were against it. They actually used our Religious Freedom Restoration Act to defend the rights of other religious minorities, and I'm glad they did that. But when it was Christians facing discrimination, then they showed their hypocrisy. But we shouldn't be surprised about this. Hillary Clinton told us several weeks ago in New York, she showed us where this fight was going. She said, those of us that are pro-life need to have our religious views changed. I don't know about you, but my religious views are not between me and Hillary Clinton. My religious views are between me and God Almighty, and I'm not changing them for her or the New York Times. But you know, the left is bent on taking God out of the public square. They are determined to make America into a secular country that our founding fathers never would have recognized, our parents wouldn't have recognized. That is a country I don't want my children to recognize. These aren't new conflicts. The founding fathers knew these conflicts were coming, and that is why they put our religious freedom rights in the First Amendment to the Constitution. They knew there's no freedom of speech or freedom of association without religious liberty. And when Secretary Clinton says we've got freedom of religious expression, all that means is a couple of hours a week in church, we can say what we want. That's not religious freedom. Religious freedom is being able to live your life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, according to your sincerely held religious beliefs. I'll say this slowly so that even Hillary can understand it. The United States of America did not create religious liberty. Religious liberty created the United States of America, and it's the reason we're here today. But you know, I told you the reason it is so important we send the right Republican to the White House. There were Republicans in D.C. that were actually secretly happy the courts ruled the way they did. What do I mean by that? They view marriage as a distraction. They don't want to do the hard work to repeal and replace Obamacare. Only in D.C. would losing be a good thing. You know, I've got a different idea. I've got a new idea for 2016. What if we tried something different? What if as Republicans, what if we embraced and endorsed our own principles for a change? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Jeb Bush says we've got to be willing to lose the primary in order to win the general election. I disagree with that. Now let me translate that for you into plain English. That is the establishment telling us we need to hide our conservative beliefs and ideas and try to get the left and the media to like us. Folks, I'm here to tell you, if we try to do that again, we will lose again. And we will deserve to lose again. For once, why don't we instead give the American people a real principled alternative? This election is about the future of our country. Why don't we instead embrace our own principles? I'm here to tell you, as your next commander-in-chief, I'm going to get 4 things done. First, we're going to stop talking about it. And we're not going to pass a comprehensive 1,000-page bill. And we're not going to grant amnesty. But instead, once and for all, we're going to secure the border and keep America safe. The only reason you need a 1,000-page bill is to pile them up at the border for your border wall. You don't need 1,000 pages to secure the border. But we must also put an end to sanctuary cities. Now, I know Congress is talking about defunding them, and that's fine, but we need to do more than that. I proposed my partners in crime package, which would say this: to these mayors, these local councilmen, these local leaders that want to flout, that want to break federal law, we should charge them, we should make them criminally responsible, make them accessories to the crimes committed by the folks that shouldn't be here in the first place, and then make them civilly liable as well so the victims of those crimes could sue them. Maybe if we lock a couple of folks up for breaking the law, they'll stop thinking they're above the law. Let's put an end to these sanctuary cities and all these crimes. The second thing we've got to do. As your commander-in-chief, I'm going to repeal and replace every bit of Obamacare. And I'm the only candidate that's offered a detailed plan on how to do that. Every Republican talks about it. I've actually offered a detailed plan about how we get that done. Third, as your commander-in-chief, I'm going to shrink the size of the federal government and grow the private sector economy, because we know we measure success in the real world, not the government world. You know, I told you about what I had done as governor. There's another side to that, and here's the other side. The left, my critics, the media will tell you, well, look, as long as he's governor, they're always cutting state government. There's never enough money in state government. When asked about that, what I say to that is absolutely right. I am guilty as charged. Because we've got a decision to make. It's either or. You either grow the government economy or the real world economy. Hillary measures success in the government economy. We measure success in the real world. 7 of the 10 fastest growing counties have been in the D.C. area. That is not a real economy. That is not a sustainable economy. If we allow the government to continue to grow, it's going to swallow the real economy and the rest of us and our freedoms. This is an either-or choice. We don't just need to slow the growth rate of the federal government. We need to shrink the size of our government. Fourth and finally, as your commander-in-chief, I will stop the hollowing out of our military. I will reinvest in our military so that America can stand with our allies like Israel and deter our enemies like Iran. We will stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power. You know what's amazing? Our president, our commander-in-chief, he has now declared war on trans fats and declared a truce with Iran, the largest sponsor of terrorism in the world. You may have seen he went to the Pentagon a couple of weeks ago. At the same week, they announced they were cutting 40,000 troops from the Army. And he said this about fighting ISIS. He said this will be a generational conflict. He said that we're going to have to change hearts and minds. We're not going to win this conflict with guns. You know, I am so glad that Generals Patton and Eisenhower didn't have that attitude in World War II. If they had thought that was simply a propaganda war, the French would be speaking German today.
So would we.
Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to have a president, a commander-in-chief with the moral clarity and honesty to tell us the truth? Instead of apologizing for America, instead of criticizing America, instead of talking about the Crusades, saying that we're at war with radical Islam, saying that Islam's got a problem and it's called radical Islam, and to say to Muslim leaders that they must do more than denounce generic acts of violence, they must denounce the individuals by name and say these are not martyrs who are going to enjoy their reward in the afterlife. To say to those same Muslim leaders they've got to embrace the same religious liberty and other freedoms for others that they want for themselves. Now, I've got a message for the president. Sometimes it does take guns to win a war. And sometimes it's not enough just to focus on changing hearts and minds. Sometimes you actually have to kill these evil, murdering terrorists before they get a chance to kill us. It is time to take the political handcuffs off the Pentagon. We need to hunt down and kill these terrorists rather than waiting for them to come attack us here at home. I've got a deal for the President of the United States. I will protect my own children against Oreos and microwave popcorn. If he will do his job as commander-in-chief and win the war against radical Islamic terrorism. How can he beat an enemy if he's not even willing to name or identify the enemy? These are the four things we must and will get done. I want to close with this. We've been blessed to live in the greatest country in the history of the world. But folks, America is slipping away right in front of us. America is slipping away. And one day we could wake up and the greatest country in the history of the world won't be able to rejuvenate itself, won't be able to recover. You know, you look at the things we have seen take place in the last 7 years. Things we thought we'd never see. A border that is not secure. Radical Islam on the rise while our president continues to make deals with Iran and Cuba and other dictators. We see $18 trillion of debt. We see more and more dependence on government. We see a Supreme Court trying to change the definition of marriage. We see Planned Parenthood caught selling babies and their organs as if they were just selling goods and services. Every day we see more and more craziness in our world. And it does seem like that America is slipping away right in front of us. But I'm here to tell you the hour is late, but it is not too late. I'm here to tell you that our best days are still ahead of us. I'm here to tell you that America can still dominate this next century. Ronald Reagan reminded us that we were that shining city on a hill. But he also reminded us that it wasn't inevitable. He reminded us that every generation of Americans has to choose for themselves to renew these principles of freedom. Previous generations have spilt great blood and treasure to give us the opportunities we have today. And now it is our time to choose what we're willing to do for our children and grandchildren. I think they'll either look back to this moment and give thanks that their parents had the courage to do what was needed, or they'll wonder why we didn't. Winston Churchill said that you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted every alternative. After 7 years of President Obama, we've exhausted every alternative. The reason I'm so confident that our best days are ahead of us is our founding fathers got something important right. They understood the genius of America is not in our government. It is in our freedom. They formed a limited government to secure but not create our God-given rights. The genius of America is in the freedom for entrepreneurs to create something from nothing, for moms and dads to raise their children according to their values. Folks, I'm asking you to believe again. I'm not asking you just to join another campaign. I'm asking you to join a cause. When I was young, my dad taught me that Americans could do anything. I believed him then, and I believe him now. I think you believe that as well. I think you have been frustrated these last 7 years. I think you do want to believe again. I'm asking you to join our cause. Together, we can take our country back. Working together, you and I, we can make sure that our children and grandchildren get a chance to live the American dream. I'm inviting you to go to bobbyjindal.com. I'm inviting you to visit with our volunteers that are here in the back. I'm inviting you to join our cause. Let us believe again. Let us restore the American dream. Let us make sure we continue to remain the greatest country in the history of the world. God bless y'all and thank y'all very, very